In this video, I'll show you... Hi, my name is Andre, and in this video, I'll share with you my takeaways from the book 0 to 1. This is the first book about business that I read after a long time, and I really enjoyed it. It's from Peter Thiel, who is, at least to me, very famous for basically shitting on the whole education system, which is something that I totally kind of like support, because I also think that the whole education system is not very lean and not very practical. So, and in this book he provides like a lot of non-mainstream ideas about startups, about business and culture and the founders. I'm going to look at my notes and just go over that with you. The intro in the first chapter talks about creating something new, and that's what the best startups, especially coming from Silicon Valley, are about right now. It's basically they completely transform the world we live in, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Airbnb, Amazon, or Google. So he talks about two different ways that humanity can progress, and it's horizontal and vertical. So the vertical one is the one that the book is titled from, and it's basically 0 to 1. That's where we make kind of like this big jumps in technology and in the way we live our lives. And then there's the vertical one, which is where we basically do small incremental steps and improving something that already is working. For example, if you think about it, like every new version of Windows or Office is just like slightly better. And then of course it also talks about globalization, and that basically means, you know, reproducing a solution to everyone on the planet, but it's not the 0 to 1 which brings like the biggest amount of value to the civilization, basically. So then we have chapter 3, which was very interesting because it talks about the concept of monopoly versus a perfect competition. So this is something that was kind of like stuck in my head from my college studies. You know, like they teach us that, you know, like competition is like very good, you know, for the market and for the users because of the price and stuff like that. But this is like a very interesting opinion, and that is that monopolies, as long as they are creative, for example, like Google or like, well, mainly Google. So monopolies like Google is that because they don't have competition, they don't have to waste money and resources and time on fighting with the competition, but they kind of like have like a certain vision of the world and where it should go. And because there's no monopoly, they have huge profits that they can then invest in the people, in research and things like that. While if we have the extreme opposite, which is like the perfect competition, so that's where there are like a lot of players that are like fighting for the customers, and it drives the prices down, and in the end nobody can make profit because like every new entrant to the market is trying to drive the prices down and have lower margins and profits. And because they basically squeeze out all the profits out of their operations, they cannot do anything big, you know, they cannot focus on the big goals. So that was very interesting for me. Chapter number 4 continues talking about the perfect competition, that it's pretty much just ideology that's installed in us from the school, which is something that I also experienced myself. And he also mentioned that people with Asperger's syndrome are actually kind of like make good founders or entrepreneurs, because they kind of like don't care about the noise that's coming from the society and from other people, so they don't kind of like deal with the expectations of others, or like don't try to please the others. They kind of like have their own vision of the world, or what they want to do, and they just follow their dreams. So chapter number 5 already goes like into more specifics about the startups. So it talks about like why certain companies like Twitter have much higher valuation than companies like New York Times. And even though like Twitter is losing money, and New York Times makes money, a lot of money, it's about the future profits, and it's about if the company can keep growing and endure, kind of like stay and be relevant for long term. And then he mentions 4 ways how the Silicon Valley companies actually get to be evaluated that highly, and why they become so successful. So these 4 things are: number 1 is proprietary technology. So it's something that I mentioned in the beginning, that they just suddenly out of nowhere come up with something that's just exponentially better than the existing solution. So he talks about 10xing things. So yeah, that's that. Then the second thing is the network effect, which is kind of like the case of Facebook. So once the people are already there and they're adding more people, then you don't want to leave Facebook because you leave everyone else there. So the startup kind of like the company grows using the network effect, if I understood that correctly. Number 3 is economies of scale. So this is kind of like related to the first point, which is the technology advantage, because like if you develop like a tool or application that can be used by anyone in the world, then you only keep kind of like a handful of people that develop and make the product better. So it's highly scalable. And the 4th thing is branding. So the best example in the book was probably Apple, and how it differentiated itself from the other competitors through branding. And then it gives kind of like a more strategy for small starting companies. And the idea is that they should start small and monopolize a certain small market, but it should be a market that is existent. And once they kind of like grab like the huge market share of that small market, that's when they can start scaling up. So for example, in case of Facebook, like it started as a network for colleges or for universities, and it got like a huge market share, like many people were using it, and then it basically just branched out into everyday lives of people. Or for example, with Amazon started with books, and then kind of like monopolized the book online sales, and then it kind of like transferred into being the biggest retail seller in the world. So continuing, next chapter number 6 is about indefinite versus definite future. So this is basically about how people view the future. And indefinite, it means that basically they leave the future state kind of like to coincidence or chance, like they don't have any concrete vision of the future, versus the definite one where you kind of like imagine like a certain way the world should exist, and then you work towards that goal. And it also is related to the fact that we as people are not like a lottery tickets, so like we should not rely or act as a matter of chance, but we should really try to consciously shape the future. Chapter 9 and chapter 10 talks about the culture. So first of all, it starts by talking about the founders, that how important it is, especially like if you're founding a company, that it's kind of like a marriage, that you really need to pick the partner so that you kind of like match with them. And then he also shares why PayPal was so successful, the so-called PayPal mafia, and it was basically a bunch of talented people that were on a mission, but that also enjoyed working with each other. So if you already kind of like take on this big mission, like what you want to achieve, then you might as well do it with people that you enjoy working with. And the funny thing is that he compared that the best startups are something close to a cult. And that's a really good comparison, because you don't want to have like a company that just like is like a bunch of consultants that just work for the paycheck, but you really want people who are like really driven mainly by the mission, and they enjoy working with each other, kind of like a cult, like this closed group of people working towards something big that like nobody understands them until they change the way the world works. Chapter number 11 talks about distribution and how important it is. So even if you have like magnificent product, in order to become a monopoly, you need to have superior sales and distribution. And what was important for me this chapter was that he kind of like gave the scale what tactics you use based on the price of your product. So if your product is very cheap, you have to rely on viral marketing. If it's like around $100, you can popular marketing, aka advertising. And then if you have like more expensive, let's say software, it's sales or complex sales, if you're selling something like worth millions. And he also mentioned that there's like a dead zone, which is like around $1,000, which means that it's difficult to do marketing, but it's also very ineffective to use direct sales, because you probably wouldn't get the money back from the sales. And the last chapter, which was very good for me, talks about the founders. And it starts by saying that out of the 6 people who started PayPal, 4 people were building bombs in the high school. So this basically points to the fact that the founders are a little bit eccentric. And he says that we do need founders who are strange or extreme, because we need these unusual individuals who can lead the companies beyond mere incrementalism. So yeah, I think it's just, from my experience, is like I've been always viewed as kind of like a black sheep or like a misfit. And yeah, I think it's just that the people who usually are like kind of like in the opposition with the mainstream is because like they view the world in a different way. So this kind of like made me feel better about myself. But at the same time, he also mentions that you shouldn't overestimate your own power, even if you're talented and smart. So you need to still work with other people, because there's only so much you can achieve on your own. And the best way for you, even if you're like extreme or unusual individual is to basically lead people to be the best they can, and kind of like follow you on this path to this new, better world. So those were my few key takeaways. Thank you for watching this video. I definitely recommend this book. If you like reading, startup business books, which kind of like usually like provide like tactics or like stories of some entrepreneurs, then this one will definitely give you kind of like a different perspective, which I always like. So thank you, and stay tuned for the next video. Bye.